Hey everybody, welcome back to another Grilling Tuesday, and today we're going to be doing something on the Blackstone griddle top. This one's going to be a nice classic, Philly cheesesteaks.
All right, we got the griddle on and we've got it checked at about 375 to 400 degrees. That's exactly the temperature we want to go ahead and do for our veggies and our steak. I like to go ahead and put down some oil, and I typically just use vegetable oil or canola oil. I have used peanut before, but what we don't want to do is use something like olive oil on this. There's just no real sense in it, and it's more expensive. This is going to certainly do the job for what we need here, which is essentially just keeping it from sticking. So now I just putting down some sliced red onions. You could certainly use any onions you prefer. I think a classic Philly cheesesteak would be your regular yellow onions, but certainly like the way the red onions taste. So that's what we chose to put down. You'll notice the other thing I like to do is I like to keep them tender, so I'm covering these up with a small dome lid, and then I go ahead and I open up the side of it and I squirt just a little bit of water underneath it. And what that does is it allows it to steam. Adding just a little bit more here, but it allows those to steam instead of getting dry. My lovely bride likes to have fried mushrooms along with her Philly cheesesteak. So no onions for her, but certainly the mushrooms. So just have some thin sliced mushrooms here, putting them in the same spot on the oil, again about 375 degrees or so, and I'm spreading them out just a little bit. You'll have to play this by ear a bit. You'll notice in a little bit in the video I will be adding some more oil to these because they just needed a little bit more. After cooking the mushrooms for about 2 to 3 minutes, I noticed they were starting to dry a little bit, so I just went ahead and added a little bit more oil to the surface here. And again, you can just put it right in the mushrooms, it's fine. So now I'm doing the old switcheroo. You start to really get your line cook on. You want to keep mixing these things around. You notice I have the onions toward the back corner because it's not quite as hot there as it is in some other places. I have the mushrooms directly over one of the burners, so they are going to cook a little bit quicker. But I'm going to alternate this dome around a little bit, you'll notice, as we go through this cook, because I want to do the same thing with these as I did with the onions. We don't necessarily have to add water underneath it, but I want the steam coming from them to go ahead and help keep them moist. And there you go. After a couple more minutes, you can see just what they look like. They're starting to get nice and soft and tender, and that's sort of the right texture I like when I'm putting them onto a burger or a Philly cheesesteak or something like that. So I want to steam these onions up just a little bit more. You can see there, not getting a ton of steam in it just because it's off on that cooler portion of the actual griddle. But again, same thing. And the idea is I don't want to get these to be really, really dark brown onions. I want them to be soft and tender. So I'm checking the heat on the other side, and we're about to go ahead and put down our steak. Again, we're going to put a healthy dose of oil right down here on the griddle. And I like to just lay my spatula flat and spread it out a little bit. I'm not trying to deep fry stuff here. So I want that oil to be warm and thin across the surface. So if you go to your butcher shop and ask them for some thin sliced steak, you can get whatever type you like. We're just using a grade A chuck, and all you'd really need, you just have them slice that up nice and thin. If you have a actual butcher in your local grocery store, they'll be able to do this for you. So we're doing just a small portion right here, added a little bit of kosher salt to the top of this, and the idea is to just go ahead and let them cook. You can see because they're so thin, they cook quickly, and it takes a little bit of practice to get these flipped over. They don't have to be perfect. This isn't like a two-sided patty, a hamburger patty, where you have to flip it and have it just right. It's really almost more like scrambled eggs. You just want to keep turning them so that they cook all the way through. And I'm using the spatula, just the sharper edges of them, just to cut some of the pieces up that are fairly large. I found that when they're small like this, it's a bit easier to, one, mix them up, and two, frankly, to eat them on the bun as well. So here's where you really sort of get your line cook experience, I guess, if you will. You're going to be checking all of these different items because all of them are cooking at the same time. So we checked out our onions. You notice how they're getting light brown, but they're getting translucent. That's what we want. We don't want them fried. We just want them translucent and soft and perfect for serving. So adding a little bit of water to keep these mushrooms moist and moving them over just a bit so they're not in the hottest spot. Because the steak is getting a little closer to done here, I'm starting to add just a little bit more oil to the onions because I do want to start getting them a little bit more crispy before we serve them. And again, just cutting up the Philly cheesesteak as we go here. Once I'm comfortable that I have these Philly cheesesteak pieces turned over really well, just want to go ahead and add just a little bit of water and steam them. I want to keep them nice and moist. It's easy to dry them out when you first put them on this griddle because they don't take long to cook and you're cooking over high heat. So putting the lid on it, adding just a little bit of steam in there kind of keeps all that meat nice and moist and tender as well. You can see I'm now about to go ahead and start shaping the meat. What I do is I sort of use the two spatulas and get it in the approximate shape of the bun that I'm going to be putting this on. And in this particular case, we are using garlic bread. If you've never had a Philly cheesesteak or a thin sliced roast beef sandwich on garlic bread, it's pretty phenomenal. But in typical classic fashion here, we're going to do a little bit of provolone cheese on this. I'm doing this one for Deb. So no onions on this one, put the cheese on and go ahead and put the dome over it. And the idea is that's going to create a small steam or heat oven, if you will, and melt all that cheese right on top of it. Keep an eye on your vegetables as you go through this. You just cannot ignore them. So keep them moving. That's the best sort of advice I'd have to make sure that they stay warm and also good and soft and not dried out for when you get ready to serve them. After just a minute to a minute and a half, that's usually more than enough time for that cheese to go ahead and be good and melted in there. Pull my bun over and just slide it under real quick. You definitely want to go fast when you put your spatula underneath it. It's a little bit like flipping an egg or a pancake. Well, you've got to commit. Get that sucker under there if you want this to work. I typically like to serve these one serving at a time. So that was the first serving. Now doing the second one. Add just twice the amount of meat here onto the griddle. And it's really about repeating the exact same process. Kind of break it up a little bit, keep it flipping around, put the lid on it with the steam on top of it. Again, when I'm ready to serve up the bun itself, I go ahead and I shape the meat into what I think it needs to be, add my provolone cheese or toppings, dome it up for a minute or two for it all to melt. You see I'm serving up all the vegetables on it and then dropping the steak right on top of it. And that's it. It's literally that simple. Philly cheesesteak's done. I always clean the griddle immediately before I even go back in the house. Squirt a little bit of water on it. Do it just about 4 to 6 inches wide at a time. And you want to use the sharp end of the scraper and just scrape it toward the back or all in one direction. I find it easiest to go toward the back just because of where the drain is on ours. Slide it to the side and run it through the drain. That's all there is to it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video on making a classic Philly cheesesteak on the Blackstone griddle.